big story around tonight about the Richmond players having to apologise to Mabiol Chol about, well, let's not be silly about it, but interfering with his anus and his genitalia during the singing of the club song. And Hugh Remington reported this on the Channel 10 News tonight, and he asked Damien Hardwick about it, and Hardwick didn't want to know about it. Well, someone at Richmond decided, yep, we need to do something about it, and they have ended up issuing an apology. To be totally honest, I'm not sure right at this second how I feel about it. So how do you feel about it?
I'm pretending my screen froze because I'm not over this story, and all I know is what I've heard. All I know is what I've heard from you, that during the club song, his teammates interfered with his anus and his genitals.
Well,
now,
Nick,
I'm once again freezing.
Okay, well, I'll pick it up then. So Nick Vlaston gave him a bit of a John Hopewati from behind, and then I think was sort of flicking at the front as well. And I think the week before, Jaden Short was the other player who was seen doing it, and Mabiol Chol didn't appear to be sort of enjoying the joke too much. Now, I've seen various reactions to this, and I think the sort of former player clicker saying, oh, come on, this is the sort of stuff that guys do.
Is that part of the Richmond club song?
I think people who aren't as sort of imbued with that footy club culture have reacted with horror. I sort of get that. I'm thinking on the run here. I've had experience with people in both camps, and I can sort of, to be honest, I can understand both reactions, but it's certainly, I'll say this. I think if we want football to be an inclusive game where people aren't subject to, harassment or let's call it what it is. I mean, it's sexual assault, really. Even if it's a joke or whatever, I think sometimes people say it's a salutary lesson and they don't actually mean it. I think this is a salutary lesson because a lot of things that footy clubs consider boys being boys or whatever, you can't do that now. The standards have changed, and I'm not altogether unhappy about that, but that is not to say at the same time I would be looking at Floston and Jaden Short and going, you Neanderthals, because I sort of get where that culture is being instilled in them.
It's, again, one of those minefields that you sort of wade through, and if you take it out of context, or even not out of context, if you take it in isolation, then it is not behaviour that is needed anywhere at a club, etc., etc. I'm going to try and expand on it a little bit, Rowan, and it can be dealt with in club, or it can be dealt with whatever, but are we teaching a generation, because now I've got kids in that generation. So my children are of Mabiol Chol's age, my older ones. I've got a 19-year-old and a 23-year-old. And I feel that sometimes they take this attitude as well. And that is when things happen that need to be addressed by the individual involved. In other words, when we become adults, we are not only responsible for our own actions, but we need to also say that we can try and control the environment around us as best we can. I'm not talking about violent crime against us, but if you don't want to be treated a certain way by a person at work or by a sibling or whatever, then take that up with that person once you reach adulthood in an appropriate manner. And I'm worried that we now have a generation that almost in all incidents, not just public incidents, but in all incidents, turn to the audience, the public, the social media world, and lay their situation bare, and think that the world, especially the world of the social media, will adjudicate and not only adjudicate for them, but will manage their lives almost for them. So it's sort of minor incidents here where I want to discuss it with my children, and they will tell me, I am so out of step. Why don't you come online and have a look what the world thinks of how you think? And you know, it's almost everything is thrown open to public debate in all spheres of life. And I'd rather young people, and I'm not saying Mabiol Chol didn't do this, but this is something that should be addressed by the people involved. And if he was uncomfortable with it, as you said, the footage showed, then I hope that he made that clear to the people involved. And if it happened more than 1 week, then he's got every right to be mightily pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll finish off on this, but I would just say this, the other element to it, and I haven't seen any opinion in the media on this yet. I'll be interested to read some, but I think the other element to it is the fact that this is a Sudanese guy, and I think there's an element, perhaps on a subconscious level, of him being a bit of a soft target because he's a younger player. He's trying to establish his place in the senior team, so he's not going to arc up about it. And also and I'm not saying it's a racist thing, but because he's from a minority group establishing himself in the AFL, it would perhaps make him less inclined to cause a fuss. So, and again, I am not saying Vlosten and Short have gone, oh yeah, we're going to pick on this guy. But I wonder sometimes whether that sort of stuff operates on a subconscious level. I think we should move on.
Very diverse playing group, Richmond.
They have, and I'm glad you said that actually, because they have been right up there with the very best clubs at embracing diversity and cultural groups and, you know, their welfare programs as a community organisation for a long time now. They have been excellent. So, you know,
and female recognising not just Peggy O'Neill, but I remember they set up with Shane Edwards their Indigenous
Academy,
and that had a very strong female element to it before there was any AFLW. And I was sort of thinking at the time, this is really clever because it is, I think, in the Indigenous community, the female is a very strong member of the family group, and it played to me to the sense of Aboriginal family very, very well. I think they're brilliant at it, Richmond.
All right, we'll zip through some more.
Yeah.
Damo says players seem to forget footy is considered a workplace. If anyone was to do that in any workplace, well, yeah, absolutely. No, it's a fair call. And
hang on. He hasn't seen Adelaide's forward line. That is not a workplace. That is a dead set bludge. That is somewhere you go to bludge. That's smoko.
But just seriously, though, I think that is one of the difficulties with the game becoming a professional, full-time profession and being seen as another workplace, because, you know, there are some parts of competitive sport that you just simply cannot replicate in a workplace. And I guess
I agree, Rowan. Hey, when you have a good end of financial year profit and loss statement, do you go out and have the biggest? Do you have a Mad Monday? And is it like winning a flag? I don't think so.
Someone, Damo again, says toxic masculine culture. He wouldn't speak out against it as his teammates would call him weak. I agree with that. I do agree with that. Now some men get very antsy about that use of that phrase, toxic masculinity, but I think a lot of what passes for blokey culture is toxic. And when I say toxic, I think it automatically excludes half the population. And, I think sometimes women talk about always being made to feel, like answerable to a male perspective. I think that's something we as men have had a lot of trouble coming to grips with. And, I put myself in that category. And, I think younger generations are going to get better at that. And I think that's a positive thing. So I guess, look, we should move on. But the bottom line here for me is I wouldn't be throwing the bloody book at those two guys for what they did. But I would certainly be sort of putting a line under it, as I think Richmond have, and say, no, you just can't do that in the 21st century.